Online, can you hear me and see me? Can someone confirm that our colleagues online can hear and see me?
Good morning. Yes, we can see you and hear you.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Thank you very much. My name is Cosmas Mamunze. I'm the portfolio manager at USA Southern Africa Trade Investment Hub, in short, USA Trade Hub, looking after South Africa and based out of Pretoria. I'll be helping with the moderation of this two-day event. So allow me to welcome you to the event, the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit Train of Trainer Workshop. So it's a train of trainer workshop. We have partner trade promotion service providers, and we have retailers, distributors, and other importers on the call attending this session. So just an outline in terms of the event. So it's a two-day event. The first day, we've got 4 presenters. So what I'll do is I'll call them out as they come. I'll introduce them as they come. So we've got Frank O'Brien, COP at USA Trade Hub. We have Rex Bowden, is online, is presenting online virtually. We have Mary Gaunda, who is our expert in terms of the trade toolkit, and we've got Francois. Francois will also be presenting online, but I will introduce them as they come. I just wanted to share some quick housekeeping issues with the participants. This is a hybrid event, so we've got participants that are attending virtually. So our ask is for those attending online to please mute your mics and turn off your cameras. You only unmute and come on camera when presenting or when asking questions. Then the second part is to do with a case study that will be shared. We ask that you please complete it as it has a bearing on tomorrow's activity. We need it for tomorrow. We also urge participants to complete the training. It's a 2-day event, so we ask you to please complete the training. If you attend today, we expect you to also attend tomorrow so that you are eligible for the certificates that will be issued at the end of the event. We also have lunch at the end of the event. Please, we ask you to please join us for lunch. We've catered for you for lunch. So please, we ask you to join us. Having said that, allow me to invite Frank. Frank O'Brien is Chief of Party at USA Southern Africa Trade Investment Hub with over 25 years experience in different areas, including East and Southern Africa, the Middle East and Central Asia. He's spent much of his professional career managing and providing technical assistance to multi agricultural projects in complex operating environments. So we are honored to have Frank leading the project. So he's going to provide welcoming remarks. Frank, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Cos, for the introduction, and welcome to the participants that are here in person and also those who are joining virtually. This is, for those of you who don't know, this is a part of a series of training activities. We've done one in each of the countries that the Trade Hub is working in. Today, obviously, we're in South Africa, and I was talking to Mary Gander, our main presenter for this session. And Mary has been very positive about the feedback received from all of the different countries so far and the different participants. So I'm hoping we will have a similar positive feedback today and tomorrow. So thank you all for that. May we have the next slide, please? So As Kaz mentioned, the USAID Trade and Investment Hub, this is a 6-year program, and we're now in our final year of implementation. For those of you who don't know, I will just very briefly present the main project, the main 3 objectives. So the main objective number 1 is increased exports to South Africa from targeted countries in the South African region. So today's training session is a toolkit to enable businesses to better understand what it is that's needed to be able to export from their country, whether it's Zambia, Botswana, Eswatini, Malawi, Mozambique, into South Africa. There is a process to be followed. It can be complicated. So the idea of this is a very practical session to work with the participants to help them and to help you better understand what needs to be done. And one of the things I say about these sessions is it's very, very important that you don't feel you can't ask any questions. If something is presented and it seems a bit strange or a bit illogical, please ask for clarification. And if we can't answer those questions fully during the sessions today and tomorrow, please reach out to the team, and we will be more than happy to work with you beyond the sessions. There is a possibility to be able to send us your contact details, and we will be more than happy to follow up on any particular questions you may have. Objective number 2 is increased investment of capital and technology out of South Africa into the countries that are part of the project. So part of this whole enabling process of supporting exports into South Africa is also working with South African businesses and investors to invest in the region, which in turn further stimulates additional exports and sales into South Africa. And then the third is about exports from South Africa and Southern Africa into the US. That's a different market, it's a different set of conditions, but it's surprising the number of businesses that we have been working with over the past 5 years now, or coming into our 6th year, who have progressed from not being able to export into South Africa to being able to export to South Africa, and taking another step to being able to export very effectively into the US market. So this is it's a gradual progression, and the activities of this project are really to help and enable exports into South Africa and then beyond into the US. Then the 2 other aspects, we do have a particular support in Zambia regarding trade facilitation, and likewise in East Africa, but those particular aspects are not so relevant for today's activity. So that's, in summary, is the presentation on the overall objectives of the project. But the real focus is how can businesses in the countries that we work in sell more into South Africa, and what can we do as a project to help you understand the process and make it easier. So that's the whole objective of today and tomorrow's activities. So with that, I'll hand over to the next presenter. Thank you.
Frank, thank you very much for the welcoming remarks. Our next presenter is Rex Bowden. So Rex runs Catalyze. It's a trade promotion service provider, TPSP, partner that has worked with USA Trade Hub on a number of linkage-related activities. So I'm not going to steal the thunder from Rex's presentation. So Rex, it's over to you.
Great, thank you. Great, so I'm just hoping everyone can see my slides. I'm on the first page to start with. Take that as a yes. I can't see it on the screen on my side. Hello, anyone feedback to me?
We can see it this
Okay.
side. Let's proceed.
Okay, awesome, great. So, yeah, just a quick, I've only got a very short session here, so I'm going to get straight to the point, not labor on too much on our history, but just a brief overview. Catalyze is a events and meetings company. We've been around since 2012. History is, before that, is I've worked in markets all over the world, helping other parts of the world get to shows around different countries and markets. But since 2012, been focusing on Africa and getting African products into international markets, which is my passion, and working from everything from tiny first-year companies all the way to massive global South African and African companies into markets across multiple sectors. So I've got a few points that I've been asked to chat to on today. Just a little bit about our role and how we facilitate linkages to markets. Bit of experience on linkage programs and what to look at. And then a little bit on what importers and exporters should watch out for in the market. So yeah, just a bit about what we do. So we develop custom B2B meeting programs. It's what we've been doing for the last 2 to 3 years. Obviously, with the change of events not happening around the world, we had to change it a little bit and started looking at virtual events, but then soon worked out that virtual events are no good unless there's someone in the background really supporting you on that. So we've started doing a lot of targeted B2B meeting programs where we target specific buyers for companies and find the right people for you to meet instead of waiting around and hoping that the right person comes to you. We go and find that. With events returning, we go back to working for international events around the world. At the beginning of 2020, we represented over 150 events around the world. Events are starting again, but what we're seeing is that, and hoping that trade provider services companies, TPSPs, are starting to look at how they do these a little bit better. So instead of just sending a whole lot of people to a market, we're really pushing the idea of, if you send someone to a market, let's set up targeted meetings for them before they get there. It's not just hope for the best, let's make it happen. So we're starting to do those again, and there seems to be a lot of pavilions going out to international markets over the next few months, the world opening up. And then thirdly, we source funding for these participations. So we work with the Department of Trade and Industry, we work with Kenyan government, with Botswana government, Rwanda, Uganda. So we worked with a lot of governments around the world and helped them organize funding for their groups to these shows. So we work with them, support the government funding in that way as well, make sure it works very well for the government and there's good return on investment, not just for the companies, but for the funders as well. So just to tell you a little bit about our targeted B2B meetings, we had a real good look at these over the last, beginning to mid of 2020, just to see how it needed to be done. And we decided that, the biggest problem is that buyers and sellers have to want to meet each other. So when we do these, we really focus on making sure that we understand the seller, first of all, and exactly how they sell, who they sell to. Take that away and go and find the buyer and see if the buyer is interested. And once the buyer is interested, go back to the seller and say, okay, seller, this is the buyer we've got. Does it meet your criteria? So that when the meeting starts, both the buyer and the seller are wanting to meet each other, not just hoping for the best. And they know a lot about each other. So that meeting starts a lot better with you understanding each other's products. So the buyer knows exactly what the seller's selling. The seller's got an idea of who that buyer is usually buying from or their level of seniority. And the meeting starts in a much stronger way. So these are a lot more direct, to the point, no time wasted. We do them virtually. We've started doing them in a live setting since last week. Actually, we did about 70 meetings live at an event, and it was phenomenal as well. Again, everyone meeting who they need to meet. Key things here, you've obviously got to do some legwork yourself, make sure your LinkedIn profile is good, link up with people, learn a little bit about the buyer as well on your side. so that when you start that meeting, you actually understand who you are talking to. We feed you that information, but we can't actually make you look at the information. So it's our responsibility to do a little bit of work there. Make sure you're supporting the process as well. So make sure you've got your products in front of you. You know exactly your terms and your custom tariffs, and this is what this trade toolkit's all about today. That I've heard a lot of the speakers yesterday in the roundup talking about different things you need to know before exporting from Africa into South Africa or into other regions. Biggest thing that we always put pressure on, and we really, it's no use having these meetings without follow-ups. So please make sure you do really good follow-ups straight after the meetings that we set up for you. We actually introduce you directly to that person with all their contact details. And then we expect people to go back, send in information about themselves, follow up. It takes a while to confirm a deal, but they do come through when you start speaking to the right person from the beginning. And then, either visit those people or bring them to you. So that's where trade shows start coming in line again. I'm conscious of time here, so I'm going to shoot through this as well. As I said, we also do live exhibitions and conferences. Again, why do these exist? Because they give that opportunity for you to get to a market, speak to someone, meet to someone, but rather do it in the right way. Make sure you get out there. You've met people before, you've set up meetings. Make sure you select the right event. So that's where you can come back to us and we'll assist you with that. Make sure you're prepared for the event as well, that you've got the right stuff out there. It is where magic happens. So people are excited, they're there, they've taken off time. What we found with virtual events, people don't take a week off, but make sure you get out there, and at live events they do. So that's where things do happen, but you've got to prepare for that. Make sure you stay longer. A lot of big companies around the world have said to me, the big business they do at events is not on the event site, it's actually after the event. So it's going and see the person in their office, taking them out for dinner, assessing the market, going into shops, seeing what other products similar to yours are out there. And again, please, follow-ups are always the biggest thing. People forget that. You just have to consistently go to it. So just we do a concierge service with all of this kind of stuff. Sorry, we get you guys out there. We check on things for you, so we can help you with that. A bit of information about that. And then quickly, just to a little bit of assessment of what is going on in the market at the moment. You'll all have seen there's a lot of sourcing platforms that are out there at the moment. They are good, but you have to understand that's a long game. So you put your information on there and hope that over 2 or 3 years, maybe someone comes in and gets involved. Virtual events, again, also not direct to the person. So you're again hoping that someone comes to you. With the virtual events, you can use this as a way of sourcing buyers. So you can source names, source things. That's where you pull information from and get really good content without having to leave your desk. Live events, of course, they're coming back. They're great, but please, let's use them in the right way. Set up meetings, get ready for them. Make sure when you go to that event, you've already got 10 meetings set up. Don't wait for people to come to you. You're one of thousands. So please make sure you're one of one when you go into the event with the person coming to meet with you. And then B2B meetings, as I've explained, direct to the point, meeting the right buyer. If I could push everyone to do these, I would. They are so phenomenal. Every program we've done, we've landed sales at those events. So, and not just one, multiple. And as we go back to the people, they come through more and more. So extremely on the ball. They can be done virtually, or they can be done live in the market, or you can bring people to South Africa and we can do it. So that's a whirlwind presentation. I'll send this out. It'll go out to everyone. You can see amazing testimonials from people all over, both retailers, manufacturers, associations, governments, etc., on different B2Bs and meetings that we've set out. But if you need to know anything more, I'm happy to give you a shout. So you're welcome to give me a shout. There's all my details there. And I'd love to discuss your program for 2022-2023. Thank you.
Rex, thank you very much for the presentation and also for the work that you are doing for the region. We also testament in terms of what you have done. Frank's presentation, he touched on objective 1. And this is one of the areas that catalyze has helped us to address. Next up is our expert. She has got over 18 years experience in terms of trade, logistics. She has even lectured on maritime studies. She has also developed the toolkit that we are discussing today. This is Mary Gaunda. Please, Mary, it's over to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and to our participants online. I'm actually really happy to be in person for a change. We've done a number of these webinars, and it's always been virtual. I've been sitting, behind a desk, and so it's nice to have the energy of a room, and I'm hoping we actually have a really good interactive session, and with those online as well. I'm going to start sharing my presentation. So we started this regional cross-border trade toolkit just over a year ago. I think the USA Trade Hub was dealing with a lot of TPSPs and exporters from the different countries within the region, and found that, yes, there's a lot of issues with exporting into South Africa. I mean, anyone who's tried to import in South Africa, you know that the requirements are very strict, especially when it comes to agricultural products. And the main idea behind the toolkit was to find ways to make it easier, more clear, and make this processes more smooth, so you reduce your delays, you reduce your costs, and make sure that the buyer actually gets the goods instead of sitting at some customs border being inspected forever because the right documents are not there. So I've surveyed and interviewed a number of exporters in different countries. I've interviewed those in South Africa as well and looked at where the issues are. And from there, we developed the regional cross-border trade toolkit to enhance people's knowledge and skills and try and find ways to gap those skills, to fill that gap and help them understand the processes. And that's the first step of actually having successful exports. So thank you for those attending. This is the training of trainers. So our aim is for you to learn how to use the toolkit and to pass on that knowledge. So use it in your own businesses and pass on that knowledge to anybody else who needs it. The toolkit is available online on the SATI Hub website, as well as the videos that we will be sharing with you. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to import, and for those in the other countries to export to you. Okay. My agenda for today is the introduction to the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit video series. We will then do a presentation. Francois will present to you for a few minutes. After that, and before tea, we'll have a quick Q&A session. So if you've got any questions for Rex, for Francois, or for myself, please let us know just before we break for tea. And those of you who are online, please use the chat box and submit your questions on that. Then when we come back, we'll be getting into the real details with the country-specific products, product-specific processes, selecting payment methods and Incoterms, and understanding the shipment timeline. And before lunch, we will do a brief on the assignment and a discussion and further Q&As. Don't be alarmed about the assignment. It's been beneficial for those who have completed it in the other countries. And it's just a way for you to learn how to use the toolkit and find the information that you need. So even when it comes to selecting your Incoterms or what payment methods, these are things that if you're a business owner, that's not what you're thinking about. Nobody cares about Incoterms when you're getting your product ready. But when you need to make the right decisions for exporting or importing, you need to understand the risks and the costs associated with these Incoterms. We'll now move into the video series. So the USA Trade Hub has developed videos for this, the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit. And it just gives you a highlight or a brief understanding of what to expect within the toolkit, and makes it a lot easier to use. The first video is the introduction to the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit, and Wendy will share that. So, yeah.
In Southern Africa, the most populous country by far is South Africa. This may benefit you if you own a business in Angola, Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, or Zambia, because exporting your products to South Africa gives you access to a much bigger potential market than your country. Additionally, these countries belong to the Southern African Development Community, which allows member countries to trade with reduced and exempted customs duties. This lowers trade costs and increases the competitiveness of your products compared to non-member countries. Beyond the potential to grow your own business, cross-border trade also contributes to economic development and ultimately helps to alleviate poverty in the region.
Exporting to South Africa, it's been very, very positive. For us as a small country to export there, it's huge.
They are the biggest consumers within our region.
By exporting to South Africa, being our closest trading partner has really helped us grow the company. We would not have been able to do as well as we have done. South Africa was the only market really for our product.
The more produce we sell and the more markets the US Trade Hub exposes us to, the more people we can actually develop.
The kind of commodities you might export to South Africa range from metals, minerals, and machinery to foods and fabrics. Examples include meat and meat products, fish, medicinal plants and natural products, nuts, seeds and beans, moringa, honey, fruits, soya products, sauces, tea and coffee, textiles and clothing, personal protective equipment, handicrafts and accessories. It is important to note that some products have specific requirements regarding applicable taxes, certifications, permits, inspections, packaging, and grading. Additionally, your business needs to understand the processes, procedures, and implications involved. Is there a market for your product? Does your business have the skills and resources to export? What are the requirements and risks? What documents and certifications are needed? These considerations all need to be addressed and prepared for as early as possible to reduce costly mistakes and delays. The USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub has developed a regional cross-border trade toolkit specifically to answer your questions and to help you get export ready. This video series summarizes some of the most relevant aspects of the toolkit, and we're here to help you. Find out more about exporting to South Africa in the toolkit or by contacting the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub.
Okay, that's quite a bit of information, which we will be going through in detail a little later. The second video is on the export process. Now, as importers, yes, you don't really need to understand the export process, but it's important to understand it because you need to understand, the types of delays that the exporters face. We normally get quite frustrated when dealing with other countries, and we feel, oh, they don't know the processes, and why are they even exporting if they don't know what they're doing? Basically, that's what we say. But it's important to understand the long processes, the delays that may be faced. And the export process doesn't start when you get your first order. It starts long before that. It starts when you decide as a company that you want to export, and you need to do your export registrations. You need to register with the Department of Agriculture. So as importers as well, there is some responsibility to check with the exporter. Do you have your phytosanitary certificate? Do you, have you done that for that cargo that you're sending to me, and so on? Because all of those documents will come to you for the clearing process. So I will ask Wendy to share the export process video, and we will discuss this a little later in more detail.
The process of exporting from Southern African countries to South Africa begins long before the physical movement of goods. The first thing you need to do is to assess how ready you are to export. In terms of your business, you should consider aspects like: are you committed to building an export business and adapting your operations? Do you have the management skills and technical expertise in your business to undertake research and development and to execute all the administrative processes? Do you have the financial resources required to fund expansion into the international market and the capacity required to produce and manufacture goods to meet demand? In terms of your products, you need to assess if there's a demand for them in South Africa. What is the competition within the market? Will it be easy to find buyers? Are your products and packaging adaptable for the South African market if necessary?
A lot of research was done before venturing into South Africa. In every single business, you have competitors. We did research and found that there is a space for our products in South Africa.
So we did our research and identify that there is a niche of baby vegetable production. So that is where we see the niche that we need to cover here so that we are able to compete in South Africa.
Remember that you don't need to tick all the boxes to start exporting. Begin the process by registering as an exporter with the relevant local authorities, such as the Chamber of Commerce or Department of Trade. Some products require registrations with other government departments, like the Ministry of Agriculture. And you will need a certificate of origin to benefit from the exemption of customs duties within the Southern African Development Community. At this point, it is advisable to speak to a freight forwarding agent who will process customs clearance at the border. The agent will be able to discuss transport costs, which you'll need for the next stage of the process, quoting. When a potential buyer in South Africa requests a quote, you may need to include costs like transport and insurance, in addition to the product costs, depending on the agreement. These costs, along with other important details, are usually supplied on a pro forma invoice. Once the buyer accepts the quote, you will then need to establish a contract with the terms and conditions of the sale, covering payment method, delivery, and insurance. To learn about this in more detail, watch our video titled Contracts and Payments. When the conditions have been accepted by the buyer, you may start processing the order. This includes packaging your products and getting them ready for transport, as well as working with your freight forwarder to arrange transport and customs clearance. As much as this stage is about physically shipping products, a priority should be completing the relevant documents correctly and comprehensively. These documents, which include invoices, packing lists, transportation documents, and certificates of origin, are discussed in more detail in the Cross-Border Trade Toolkit, which also covers other aspects of exporting to South Africa.
The cross-border toolkit, we've used it. We're checking and cross-checking what do we have, where can we improve, what are the conditions, what are the certification that we need to meet. So we're gradually improving ourselves so that we're able to do some cross-border export.
Using the U.S. Trade and Investment Hub covers a lot of these requirements, and they actually guide you and walk you through contracts.
The export process may seem detailed and daunting, but you don't necessarily need to be a large-scale business to export. If you're ready and willing, help is available. For information or guidance, contact the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. To start the contract process, you send a quote to the buyer. If the buyer is happy with the terms and price, they will accept your quote. Congratulations! You're a giant step closer to becoming an exporter. But before you celebrate, remember that there are risks and responsibilities for you and your buyer. So it is in both of your interests to make sure you have a contract that is clear and comprehensive. In international trade, the contract is seldom one single document. It is the negotiation that usually happens by email between the buyer and the seller. A good contract will stipulate the details, terms and conditions of the sale, protecting both parties, helping to avoid risks like non-delivery or non-payment, and make the responsibilities of the buyer and supplier explicit. Broadly, your obligations as the seller are to deliver the goods, hand over all relevant documents, and transfer ownership of the goods. The goods must conform to the description, quality, and quantity you committed to, and must be packaged in a way that preserves and protects the contents. The buyer's obligations are to comply with the agreed formalities, pay for the goods, and take delivery. The contract must specify where and when delivery will take place, where risk passes, and who is responsible for which costs. The International Chamber of Commerce, Incoterms, provides a simple way to state these requirements. To learn about this in more detail, watch our video titled Incoterms. One of the most important components of the contract is your and the buyer's agreement on how and when you will be paid. There are various methods of payment. Cash in advance is the most secure for the exporter, as you are paid in part or in full before delivering the goods. However, this method is used infrequently, as it places the financial burden and risk on the buyer. A letter of credit is a bank's written undertaking to make payment once the required documents are submitted. Letters of credit involve many different parties and are more expensive than most other payment methods, but they provide security for both the seller and the buyer. A cheaper but less secure option is a bank collection. This is where through your bank you can send a document to the buyer, initiating the collection of money owed to you. Although this is legally binding, it does not give you as much protection as a letter of credit. Lastly, you can sell on an open account basis, whereby you send shipping documents directly to your buyer, who should then pay you. This carries a risk of non-payment and is usually used by big established sellers and buyers. It's not recommended for new exporters, and if you do use this option, export credit insurance is advisable. So, your products have been shipped, risk has passed to the buyer, everyone has fulfilled their obligations, and you've been paid. Now you can celebrate. For more details, information and guidance, you can consult the Cross-Border Trade Toolkit or contact the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. Exporting your products to South Africa can be great for your business and your community. Of course, there are significantly more responsibilities and risks that you take on as an exporter compared to trading locally.
The risk and responsibilities when exporting, I think the greatest one is insurance. You need to make sure that you insure your goods because anything can happen.
The contractual agreement are so important. Payment terms are so important, and ensuring that you maintain quality from farm to the final client.
For this reason, the agreement or contract between the supplier and buyer is a crucial part of doing business. It should clearly and explicitly specify what each of you is responsible for, where those responsibilities start and end, and indicate what can happen if one of you does not fulfill your obligations. Fortunately, this part of your contract does not need to be created or written from scratch, as an established and globally accepted set of agreements already exist. Incoterms, or International Commercial Terms. Incoterms are published by the International Chamber of Commerce, or ICC for short. They've been used since 1936 and are updated every 10 years. The most recent update in 2020 has 11 different Incoterms, with different options applicable to different modes of transporting the goods. 7 of the options are appropriate for any mode of transport, and 4 are only applicable for sea and inland waterway transport. You can access more details on the ICC website and even download a wall chart which summarizes the 11 options. The USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub has also developed an easy-to-use summary tool to help you and the buyer choose the correct Incoterms for your order, with the most appropriate terms regarding delivery, costs, and risks. Once you decide on a specific Incoterm, you will be clear about your responsibilities regarding transport, the insurance cover you need to procure, where the goods must be delivered, which documents you must provide, and who is responsible for processing customs clearance. Buyers and sellers need to understand what they're responsible for during each transaction, and Incoterms provide an easy way to reduce the potential for legal complications, provided that each party understands their roles and obligations. In short, Incoterms help you and the buyer to minimize or avoid uncertainty and risks.
So the importance of a contract is to ensure that you, as the manufacturer and exporter, is safeguarded against anything that can go wrong.
As well as dealing with their clients, you need to ensure that you are contracted, you are sure of the payment terms, you are sure that they will not say your stock is not in good condition, whereas when it left here, it was in good condition. So the contractual agreement are so important.
The summary of the Incoterms, as well as help and guidance about other aspects of exporting, are provided in the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit. You can also contact the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Just from my side, can you guys hear me? Because on our side, we on the live feed, we cannot hear anything from the mic. So I just hope that you guys can hear me. So yeah, here we go. So my discussion today is a import-export expert's guide to getting your goods to the international market. For me, that in short, that means getting all the logistical arrangements done. So here's just a short video on what we do, and I will chat after the quick video. Yes, everybody. So in short, what my company import-export experts do, people tend to confuse selling goods and products with moving goods and products. So what we do is we make sure that your goods move effectively from point A to point Z. So people tend to think that we are freight forwarders. So we are, yes, in short, we are freight forwarders, but we are, sorry, I just want to move it along. So we are a niche freight forwarder. So we make sure that you as a first-time importer, exporter is taken care of, and we make sure that all those tick boxes that's mentioned in the toolkit is correctly understood, and that is correctly implemented into your export. Why it makes sense to import and export. So like you guys can see, South Africa is this cool country in the bottom of the world, but we are centrally positioned strategically to the rest of the world. So we are very fortunate to be the middle point of the world. I believe that South Africa, we've got the best goods in the world. Africa has got the best goods in the world, and we just need to show the world what we can do and what we can give them. And this is what my company does. We make sure that you are equipped and that everything is taken care of so that you can export or import your product. So the key elements that I just want to talk to you today is, are you passionate enough about your product? So everybody probably listening to me now would say yes. So making sure that your product is ready and making sure that you have the correct tick boxes in place is very important. So what we also do is make sure that your product strategy is tailored to your specific product, not a one size fits all. So a lot of people, they think that there's one method of importing and exporting, but like you guys have seen today, each product has its own specific rules, own specific packaging, own specific method of transport. So we expose our clients to all the different methods of transporting so that you are taken care of. Okay, so and the other thing is we focus on long-term business relationships with our clients and service providers with a personal touch. Okay, so the first element, is your company registered as an importer and exporter? So from an international trade perspective, you can't just go and start exporting or importing. You need to register your company with your local import-export authorities. In South Africa, it would be SARS Customs. The second point would be getting your company import-export ready. So deciding that your company is import-export ready is one of the most important strategic decisions that you can make. So you need to look at the life cycle of your product. You need to make sure that you have the capacity and all of that to export if you get a huge order, or that your product has all the label requirements, for instance. So the third thing is creating a strategy. So you need to make sure that your cash flow and things like and products and your production facility is set up to get your product to the export market. So labeling, also I've mentioned labeling, especially to the Chinese markets and to the Middle Eastern markets. You need to make sure that you conform to their regulation and a lot of times to their labeling language requirements. We also provide training, so a lot of information comes to you at once. So you get the information and it's an overload. So you have questions, you have specific questions to your product. We provide that service where we go to your company, we either do an in-person training or we do a virtual training. The fifth element is the contract. So we will do an overview of your contract to make sure that you understand the risks and the responsibility of each of the parties in that contract. The reduction of the freight cost, and a lot of people, this is the thing that they focus on first, but I specifically put this in later in my slide. Cost is subject to your requirement of your product. Is your product time sensitive? Is it volume? Is it, what is your requirement of your product? So we make sure that you get the best value for your money. So for instance, sending a big amount of cargo would be ocean freight. But if you send a little box of 1 kilogram, it will be a courier. Or for instance, if you send 100 kilograms, we will send it with air freight. So we'll make sure that you understand the cost and the risk and the time involved in getting your product to and from your client. So number 7 would be the risk reduction. So understanding your product, for instance, food or cosmetics or batteries, the risks involved in trading with your product and the logistics in moving your product. Number 8 would be improving the ship and transfer time. I say to my clients, we plan effectively and then we move our products effectively, making sure that your documents are in order, your permits are in order before you move your product. There's nothing so frustrating than moving your product and you don't have the efficient permits in place. So we make sure that, for instance, you have a fruit, do you have the correct permits in place before you move your goods? Number 9 would be selecting the best freight forwarder or service provider. So we make sure that we partner with the best service providers out there, the best transporters, the best air handling agents, the best ocean line agents. So my last question would be, are you guys import-export ready? Thank you. Any questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're very soft, but I can hear you a little bit, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
That's better. That's better.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Hearing it from one who is involved in importing and exporting, and I like the question that you asked. Are you import and export ready? That readiness aspect is very important. That question as well, when we look at South Africa, we have had discussions with others to say, okay, we're not importing, but the reality is that South Africa is also importing for further processing and further exportation from the region. So it is very important to have an understanding of this toolkit, to have an understanding of the aspects that you touched on and what Mary touched on as well, the Incoterms and the contracts and the risks. It's very important to have an understanding of that. Now before we break for tea, are there any questions following the presentations that we have just had? So both those that are participating online, please lift your hand and come on camera, or you can type your question in the chat box and colleagues will help with that. Any questions? Colleagues, if you see questions, please help us. Okay, so it doesn't look like we have got questions so far. My question is to Francois and Rex. What has been your biggest challenge in facilitating exports to South Africa? One of the biggest, if you were to rank them, the main challenge, what is that? Importing to South Africa, we're looking at into South Africa. You can start with Francois, then Rex.
I'd say the biggest challenge for me would be the fact that the weather elements in South Africa, we get the worst of everything, I think, in South Africa. So when the wind blows, then everything stops in terms of ports. So the biggest challenge for me as a freight forwarder and connector of clients would be the elements, the weather elements. And my biggest challenge would be, why don't we have alternatives? Why don't we have alternatives to if something like the wind blows or if power goes off? Why don't we make it easier for our importers and exporters to get the cargo into our country? Because there's because our ports are very delayed, our ports are very congested. So why don't the South Africa as a trade hub look at spreading out the loads of, let's say, the containerized cargo to smaller ports like Kuga or to Richards Bay or those ports? Why focus only on ports like Durban and Cape Town? You know, we have all the facilities that we need. Create investment, incentives for importers to move their cargo either via Kuga or Richards Bay or these ports.
Okay. Thank you very much. So in summary, is the challenges to do with congestion at the ports of entry. Thank you. Rex, from your side, what has been your observation? Is Rex still on? Okay. All right. Now, at least there's a question that has been, an issue that has been raised, and we've got a maritime studies expert here. I'm sure she'll address those things as well. So in the absence of further questions, we can break for tea, coffee. Thank you. So we should be back here. What's the time now? Those that are online, please don't go away. Let's reconvene at 20 past 10. Thank you.
Two, one, one. Two, one. Two, one, two.
Online.
2, 1, 2.
Can you hear me?
Right. We are about to resume, going into our second segment of today's proceedings. I hope our online colleagues are still on. We're just waiting for a few colleagues that are still outside from this room. But having said that, the previous presenters, they touched on different aspects to do with the toolkit in passing, or rather not in detail. This segment now takes us, or helps us to dive into the nuts and bolts to some extent. And Mary Gonda is going to take us through the through that. Mary, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you to the participants here and those at the venue. What is very important when you're speaking. So I've had some interesting questions during the break. And I think before we start with the second part, let me just address some of the concerns that Francois had. Look, I've been in shipping for years. We are not going to solve the port problem anytime soon. And that's the reality that we are dealing with. And also, it's not up to Transnet which ports are used. It is up to the shipping lines. They base that on the demand of the cargo, of deliveries, imports and exports. So they literally just look at stats, where's the most containers and where should our ships be. So as I said, it is not issues that we can actually solve. It's a lot of discussion between government and Transnet, which is part of the government. And there's, a lot of people talk about privatization. Yes, there's been talk about it, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. So I think what's important when you're importing or exporting is to understand these are the limitations that we have to live with, and we need to make decisions based on that. Because, fighting the system, I used to go for these meetings, where all these different industry and government and academics and stuff, you are discussing the same issues every year, same problems. So, the idea about the toolkit is looking at things that we can control. What process can we control? How much work can we do ourselves as exporters, as importers? Because there are going to be delays. Ships sink, containers fall overboard, trucks have accidents, there's strikes. There's a whole lot of things that we need to deal with, and taking that into consideration, what do we need to do as exporters, as importers, as business owners? So if you go through the toolkit, you'll find that there's no discussions about the problems really, the external problems that we can't control. One of the things that's come out of the previous webinars, in all the different countries, we had people like you sitting in the same room, and we've encouraged them to sit and talk to each other. Because people come from different backgrounds, but you can help each other. And, we've had government officials in the same room as people. And these are decision makers. You have directors from the Department of Trade and Industry. So the idea as well with these sessions is talk to each other, learn from each other, and look at how you can help each other. Because, as much as we can push for policies to be changed, processes to be changed when it comes to higher level government, and what they've already put in place, these things don't happen overnight. So it is back to us, as a business owner, what can you do and how can you alleviate the risks from your side? So going back to the presentation, we've looked at a number of products, and I'm going to go through each country that we've looked at and the different specific products from there. And, we've met with all of the countries, we've met with the exporters, as well as the TPSPs and the partners of the USA Trade Hub, who are so keen to actually export to South Africa. And some are already exporting, so they understand the processes. And the processes are not easy because, as I've said before, you will have these challenges. Yes, you will have to get your certificate of origin, but before that, you need to register your company and so on. But there are so many products that can be exported from these countries. There's so much of potential that you can look at for importing into South Africa. And yes, there's a lot of shipping problems, but a lot of these countries can be done over land. So you've got the option of rail and truck to use, and courier, and you've got your air freight and so on. So that's the good option about importing from the region itself. It's a lot quicker than waiting for a container that comes from China and is sitting out at the port for 2 weeks. And then when it comes into port, there's congestion at the Durban port and so on. These are everyday realities. So that is why I'm actually really, really happy about this, because if you are importing and exporting within the region, you don't have to deal with all of these issues, because as it is, the transit time from Shanghai to Durban is 25 days, on a good day. And then you're dealing with all the other additional delays. So it's easier to actually import from within the region. The only issues with the region is, if you're looking at importing honey from Eswatini, you're going to have to make sure that your exporter knows the requirements. And that's where we have come in and said to them, and on the toolkit, you'll find fact sheets on different products to say, these are the requirements for honey. So please make sure you're meeting them. Even your labels have to be, correctly done and so on. So Angola, you've got fruits, fish, machinery, Botswana, meat and meat products. So they're also looking at processed meat products. We've been involved with them with getting processed meat products coming out of Botswana and dealing with the Department of Agriculture and vet service, vet health, and trying to get that approved. You've got textiles and apparel, salt, handicrafts and accessories, cosmetics. I know we've got a lady here in cosmetics. We've got someone here dealing with SPS and phytosanitary certificates, so that's good. Personal protective equipment. Out of Eswatini, you've got macadamia nuts, honey, textiles and apparel, sauces, bananas, handicrafts and accessories, and PPE. With Lesotho, you've got freshwater fish, textiles, bottled water, which they're still trying to get approved, medicinal plants, handicrafts and accessories, and PPE. Malawi, you've got groundnuts, macadamia nuts, soya beans, and soya products. So all of these different products, they all have different requirements. And within the toolkit, we do have further information on what the requirements are and whether or not you need import permits. And we will be sharing the presentation once we are done today. So you'll have an idea of what you can actually source from these different countries. You've got tea, coffee, sesame seeds, pistachios, moringa, handicrafts. Oh, and going back to Botswana, one of our colleagues is starting to export truffles. So that's an interesting one. Mozambique, you've got groundnuts, macadamia nuts, cashew nuts, fish, specialized beans, coffee, moringa, handicrafts and accessories, honey, baobab powder, cosmetics. Namibia, fish, meat and meat products, textiles and apparel, salt, olive oil, dates, raisins, table grapes, wood charcoal, cosmetic products. Zambia as well, you've got similar products. Also, with Mozambique, they are also looking at exporting olive oil. So that's also a very good option. I mean, they're quite close to us, and so is Namibia. So there is tons of products that you can import from these different countries, and they do have challenges, and they are aware of their challenges, and they are working on reducing those. So whether it comes to the packaging, so if you are sourcing from any of these countries, be very clear about what your requirements are. Going to a country and saying, yes, you want macadamia nuts, how do you want it? Do you want it roasted and salted? How processed do you want it? Because at the end of the day, you're looking at different value chains, and to add value costs money, and it will cost you money at the end of the day. But look at whether or not they do have the facilities, because if they don't have the facilities to roast and salt macadamia nuts or whatever other, cashews and so on, can you import it in raw form, and can you process it here? Because it may actually be easier. So yes, they do have the product, but maybe they may not be able to process it to the extent that you want. And remember, it might be a little more costly for them to get it done, whereas we may already have all the facilities here in South Africa to do it. So look at that. So there are a lot of products that you can go into with these countries. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but the idea behind all of these webinars and presentations we've had is to try and open the communication as well and remind people, you want to export, communicate with the importer. Let them know, realistically your timeline. So we've gone through the different how to actually figure out your timelines. We've gone through, what they need to consider, just doing their quote to you. They need to be talking to clearing and forwarding agents to know how long it takes to transport something, to know the costs that they need to quote you and so on. So even the quote may take at least a few days. So the exporters need to understand it, the importers need to understand that as well. Okay, moving on to country and product specific requirements. Okay, if you go to page 36 of your toolkit, you'll find these tables there. So part of the process of putting this toolkit together was going through every single product that we were looking at exporting from these countries. I think you can brighten the lights a bit because they can just focus on the document itself. Sorry. Can we just brighten the lights a bit? So they don't have to focus on the presentation on the screen and they can look at the documents. So those of you who are online, please, if you've got, you should have copies of the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit. And if you go to page 36, this is what we are covering. Now, we've gone through every single product and looked at what are the requirements for importing into South Africa. It can be brighter, it's fine. Don't worry, they don't, no, brighter please. They don't need to focus on the screen. Okay, so it can be tedious dealing with the import permits and so on, but these are processes that we need to go through for importing. So your first product is groundnuts. We've looked at the VAT because if you are importing from within the SADC region, you do not have customs duties. So you are exempt from customs duties, but you need to have a certificate of origin. So your exporter needs to provide you with a certificate of origin. So you are not paying customs duties. Okay, so make sure that you do get a certificate of origin from the exporter. But that said, you still need to pay VAT or excise duties where it's applicable. So your VAT is calculated as 15% of FOB value plus duties plus excise plus fuel tax and plus 10% of the FOB value. Now, if you are importing from Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, or Namibia, the BLNS countries, you don't have to worry about the last 10% in your calculations. It doesn't make a huge difference to your overall VAT that you're paying, but it is a slight difference, so it might help. So that is why, you know, when you're importing from other countries, let's just say China or whatever, you will be paying normal duties depending on the products. But if you are importing from within the SADC region, you don't have the cost of customs duties. So while the SADC agreement is still in place, I suggest you take advantage of it because customs duties can be anything, you know, 20%, 40%. It depends on the product itself. And then we show you how to calculate your total landed cost. So your landed cost is your ex-works cost. So the ex-works cost, this is going back to your Incoterms, which we'll do a little later. Your ex-works cost is getting the product ready, okay? So you are sourcing the product or you're sourcing the raw materials, you process it, you package it, you get it ready for shipment. Everything up until it is packaged and ready to be picked up from your premises, that's your ex-works cost, right? Then you've got your origin charges, you're looking at transport costs, clearing and forwarding costs, your documentation charges, and so on. Insurance, those costs will be dependent on the Incoterm that you choose. So please, when we go through Incoterms, remember that you need to know exactly when you need insurance from, at which point. So if you are ordering something and it's FCA from Botswana, you must know what address you will have to have that insurance from, or at what point, because FCA could even start at the seller's warehouse, okay? And FCA means you will actually arrange the transport from that point, right? So remember that your insurance cost is dependent on the Incoterms. Your freight, so that could be your trucking, if it's overland, your rail, your air freight, or shipping costs. So if you're importing from Mozambique and you decide that you're importing via ship, and you will be happy to deal with the delays, then you will look at the sea freight there, right? And then your duties and taxes. So remember, within SADC, you are exempt from customs duties on condition that you've got your certificate of origin from the seller, right? And your other taxes, which is your VAT and excise, where applicable. So for groundnuts, so I'm not going to go through the VAT calculations and total landed costs again. For groundnuts, you do need an import permit. And that's, so you as an importer, you need to contact the Department of Agriculture and fill out the import permit application form. If you need a copy of it, I will be showing my details at the end of this presentation, or you can contact the USA Trade Hub colleagues here, and we will send you the application form, right? And on the application form, it has the contact details for the Department of Agriculture and Plant Health, their telephone numbers and email addresses. They are responsive, but you're not going to get an immediate response. Sometimes you do need to send a reminder. So I have been dealing with them quite a bit, and it's about getting the correct email addresses and so on. So if you use the email address that's on the application form, they are a lot quicker as opposed to using personal email addresses. An import permit takes up to 30 days. It costs less than 300 Rand, right? So when you are applying for an import permit, remember that if you're planning on importing more than the current shipment, so let's just say for the current shipment, you are importing 1,000 KT or 1 ton. And you know that if everything goes well, you may order a lot more from that seller. So on your import permit, make sure you actually add that on, because your import permit is valid for a year. So you don't have to keep applying for an import permit. Just make sure you've got as much information as possible. So they will need the seller's details, they'll need your details, the actual cargo, the scientific name for the agricultural product, and then the amount of cargo you're expecting over what period. So your import permit is valid for a year. Make use of it, so then you don't have to keep applying every time. If you don't have an import permit and it's required, your cargo will be stopped. And I've been advising exporters, please make sure that your risk stops at the border, so you don't have to worry about the problems in South Africa, right? Because they don't know how to deal with customs here or the Department of Agriculture here. So you as an importer, you need to make sure that you have your documentation ready, you have what you need to do, right? So make sure you're getting the documentation from the exporters. That'll be your commercial invoice, packing list, transport documents, unless you are arranging that, and your phytosanitary certificates, certificate of origin, and so on. And then the import permit is your job. So as soon as you are ordering your goods, you start your import permit process. I've advised people, do not ship until somebody has that import permit, because you can't say to me, okay, so if I'm going to apply for an import permit today and it takes 10 days, and you've already shipped the product, or the exporter has already shipped it to me, and I don't have that import permit, I can't go to the exporter and blame them. We all need to understand the different processes and communicate. So you as an importer, you need to make sure you've got your import permits. So do it as early as possible. As soon as you get the first quote, start applying for your import permit, because it does take up to 30 days. I've had to wait 30 days for certain things, okay? And an inspection may be required. Remember, if an import permit is applicable, you will be inspected. And let me tell you, when one organization decides to inspect, they all do. Okay, so suddenly customs is on board with their inspection. So you've got like 2 or 3 inspections happening at the same time. You've got extra storage costs. You've got to move the cargo, and it's moved in bond, which means you don't have to have control over it. So it's either the shipping company or the freight forwarder who has control over it. So you cannot get that cargo until it's been released either by customs or the Department of Agriculture. So if you don't have the right documentation, you have to expect a lot of delays and extra costs. So each depot that they use may have different costs. I can't tell you, how much it's going to cost you, because that inspection may take 3 days or 3 weeks. And it depends on how quickly you can get your documents to them. So that is why I'm saying, as early as possible, make sure you have your import permits where required, and make sure you have the right documentation. Because if you're missing even one document, it's going to be tedious, it's going to be frustrating. And, at some point, you might not even be making a profit out of your shipment. Okay, moving on to macadamia nuts. Here, again, you need an import permit. So again, you would have to contact the Department of Agriculture. Cashew nuts, it depends where the origin is. You may not need an import permit, but I suggest, because the rules change all the time, contact the Department of Agriculture and just double check with them. Soya beans and soya products, an import permit is required, but also remember, when you're dealing with soya, you also need to understand that there may be other tests and assessments that you need to do for the product, like checking the protein content of it. Okay, so that is something that you as an importer may need to do for your buyer, final buyer. So you need to be sure that the exporter can either do the test where they are, or you might need to bring the cargo into South Africa and test, which is a bit risky, because then it's too late to, go back and forth. But remember, not all countries are going to have the right testing facilities, so keep that in mind. Okay, honey, an import permit is required. Honey, any imported honey has to be irradiated. There is a fact sheet on the toolkit with a lot of information about honey, because imports of honey, is very strict. It is before the annexures. So you will find, I think, at least a page on honey. So it explains what you need to do. So the things like making sure that the labeling is the correct size. So maybe it has to be 2 millimeters or 4 millimeters, depending on what it states there. So please be very careful when you're importing honey. You will definitely have an inspection. So bear that in mind when you're dealing with the costs. Sugar beans, you will need an import permit, and that as well, you'll deal with plant health. So any, there are exceptions such as broad beans and horse beans. So that information is there on the license requirements. Inspections may be required. So remember, it is up to the controlling authorities. Sometimes a shipment may go smoothly, and we've had that, where people have imported, all the shipments go smoothly, and then the next minute they have inspections and they're not prepared for it, and then they get frustrated. So always be prepared for inspections, whether or not they happen. If they don't happen, just be happy. But don't take it as a guarantee that your next shipment will not be inspected. Fish, the import permit is usually handled by the Department of Trade and Industry. To be honest, fish is a bit hard to get info on when you want to import. I've been, sent from pillar to post on who to contact, and even phoning people and stuff. So it is quite tedious. So you would have to get involved with the Department of Agriculture, who will send you certain information. And then it's back to the Department of Trade and Industry and so on. Okay, your meat and meat products, yes, definitely import permit is required. Even if it's processed products, you know, if it's processed, so let's just say the cargo comes into Namibia from Brazil, they've imported meat products, and then they process it, and then they are exporting to South Africa. Remember, when you're dealing with animal health, they will want to know, and they want proof of where it was imported from. So I've dealt with them, and they are very strict. So they'll want the import documents. So whoever is you buying from will have to provide those documents for you to be able to get an import permit for this. That's the reality of dealing with animal health. South Africa is extremely strict, and for good reason. You know, we don't have these real rules for nothing. It's for our own protection. But as a business person, you don't want to deal with it, but it's there, and we have to deal with it and make sure, you know, animal health, plant health, and our health is seen to. And that's the main reason for these rules that we have in place. And meat products are always inspected. I've seen it in shipping where every single import of some of the biggest importers are inspected. So without a doubt, we know those containers are going to be stopped, and they need to have their vet certificate, right? Then you've got your textiles and apparel. So here you don't need any certificates, but tariff rate quotas may apply. So when we talk about tariff rate quotas, we mean the maximum amount of cargo that we can accept from any country, right? Because remember, when it comes to textiles, we in South Africa, we have our own textile industry. And to protect that, we need to actually limit the imports that we have of certain products, right? So we had a wonderful textile industry 30 to 40 years ago, which went right down because of imports. And now that we're trying to build it up again, you will find quotas. So I don't think you would hit the quotas with the neighboring countries, but just be aware that if you are above the quota, you will have to pay customs duties. Okay. Salt and import permit is required. Okay, and an inspection is required for salt as well. Olive oil as well, import permit may be required. So please check with the Department of Agriculture if it is, and just send your application for an import permit. So they'll come back to you and tell you, yes, you need it, or no, you don't. Sauces, you don't really need import permits because sauces are processed and they're usually heat treated. Okay, so there's nothing from the agricultural products. So even if you're using chilies, you know, it's cooked really when you're dealing with sauces. So you may not need import permits with that, but they may inspect it. Dates, they are exempted from import permits, but as I've said before, just check with the Department of Agriculture just to be on the safe side, because, you know, customs has triggers on their systems, depending on the HS code. So, you know, as soon as that HS code is triggered, you must know there'll be inspections and so on, right? So rather be on the safe side. If you have something in writing from the Department of Agriculture, use it. To say, you know, if they've said, no, you don't need it, then you can use it as proof, because customs will ask you for the documents and the proof. And they do have relationships with the different departments as well. Raisins, inspection are required, but remember, raisins are processed, so you may not need an import permit. Table grapes, inspections are required. And I've added a note there for 8% of FOB value. That's under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. The reason for that is to just remind you that, yes, we do have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that's in place right now. There's, I think, about 40 countries that have signed. I could be wrong. But we don't have all the agreements in place, right? So you may not necessarily have, you may not necessarily be exempt from customs duties under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, right? So just be wary of that and make sure that you check before you import or export what the requirements are and whether or not you will be paying customs duties. So don't take it for granted that there's no customs duties. It does depend on the product and HS code itself, because the different countries are starting to negotiate on different products. T, an import permit may be required. Here it says Department of Trade and Industry, but also make sure you are talking to the Department of Agriculture as well. Bananas, import permits are required. I think Mozambique says they export a lot of bananas to South Africa. So if you are looking for bananas, they're right next door. Specialized beans. There's a problem with the sound. Oh, is there someone online? Sorry, just give me a second. Okay, I think they've been muted. Okay. Specialized beans, import permits are required, and there are exceptions for broad beans and horse beans, and inspections may be required. Coffee, import permit is required, inspections are required, and there is a prohibition with coffee where coffee beans that are colored, polished, steamed, or coated or that have any kind of substance added to it is prohibited, right? So please keep that in mind if you're importing coffee. Sesame seeds, you don't need an import permit, but an inspection is required. Pistachios, import permit is required, inspection may be required. Bottled water, import permit is required. Okay. Moringa, an import permit may be required and a site certificate. So those of you who are involved with cosmetics, you know, a site certificate is, CITES is the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. So that's fauna and flora. So the exporting country will have to check that they don't need a site certificate. This is just to confirm that we are not trading in endangered species or any product that's on the CITES list. So the CITES list has a number of products there that you cannot import or export, right? So the different countries would be able to provide site certificates. And this normally affects cosmetics because you are dealing with you know, different oils and so on. Okay, and with moringa, an inspection is required. Medicinal plants, again, yes, you need your import permit. Please make sure you've got the correct scientific name when you are applying for that import permit. Also, medicinal plants, you know, could be drugs. So please be very wary about what you're importing because some things may be acceptable here, but it's not acceptable in other countries. So you can grow it in your backyard for your own use. But you may not be able to export or import it. Inspections are required for medicinal plants. Handicrafts, you don't need import permits and there's no tariff quotas on it. But please bear in mind when you're looking at handicrafts, leather products and anything with animal skins, be careful because you may need an import permit for it. Okay, or even a site certificate, depending on what animal and so on. So if you're dealing with stuff where it has animal products or animal skins, just be aware you may need to contact the Department of Agriculture, Vet Health, and make sure that you're not contravening any rules with that. And with leather products as well, you do need import permits, so just bear that in mind. Cosmetics, you may require site certificate, but that also depends on the ingredients itself. Okay, so just be very wary when importing cosmetics. As much as it's processed, you need to follow the rules and make sure that the exporter is aware of it. You know, just ask them, is there a site certificate for this? That's all you need to do. And they can check whether it's required and how to actually send it to you. Cosmetics, a lot of the cosmetics is under luxury goods. So here you will be paying customs duties or excise duties. So you don't pay your normal customs duties, but excise duties are applicable for cosmetics. There are some necessities like soap and so on, which may not need excise duties, or excise duties may not be applicable for them. But again, you have to be very careful with the HS codes that you are choosing for them, just to be on the safe side. And PPE, because it ends up being a lot of textile, your tariff rate quota may apply. So that's all our products. And it's taken, I know it's a lot of information. If there's anything that's not on the list that you are looking at importing and you need some help, just checking, is the excise duties, or, do I need an import permit? So please contact us. This is sort of like a free service for now, because use it. It's a resource, really, dealing with SATIHub or the USA Trade Hub, where we can provide you with information for free. So please, if there's anything you're looking for importing, and if there's any products, so going back to the different countries and what they export, if there's any products that you are interested in, contact the SATIHub reps. They'll put you in touch with the different countries. They all have country representatives who are dealing with the exporters and the TPSPs there, and they can put you in touch with the sellers. There's also the African Trade Platform, which a lot of the sellers are trying to get onto. So I think, the African Trade Platform is partnered with the USA Trade Hub, and a lot of the exporters from the different countries are trying to get onto it, right? But in the meantime, just speak to your country rep here, no matter which country it's from, whether it's Eswatini or Mozambique. I know there's language barriers, but a lot of them are helpful with trying to get translations done and so on. So, and there's also Google Translate, which helps. Just make sure you are getting the documents in the right language. But please, if there's anything, and even those who are online, if there's any products that you're interested in, even put your details on the chat if you want to be contacted about it. And I'm sure someone from the Trade Hub would be able to help you with that. Okay, so those are the country product-specific requirements. Do you all have any questions before we go on to Incoterms? Just so I can rest my voice. Anything online as well? Okay, should I take that as a no? Okay, so we're going to move on to selecting payment methods and Incoterms. Another intense topic. So payment methods, you've got 4 payment methods to choose from. Remember, international trade is not like going into a store and purchasing a product. It's not walking to the mall, walking to a Clicks and getting your essential oils there. You're dealing with a lot more complex processes. When you walk into a store, even if you go online onto Takealot or any one of these websites, you just literally just swipe or put in your credit card details, your bank card details, and there's so many other payment methods these days as well. But when you're dealing with shipments coming across the border, it's a lot more complex, right? Because it's bigger amounts of payments as well. You're not buying for 100 Rand or 1,000 Rand or even 10,000 Rand. You're buying for dollars, like $10,000, $20,000, or even more. So you need to make sure that when you are paying, you're getting the goods that you have ordered. Now, the problem with this is that, yes, there's issues like you really don't know who the seller is. It's not as easy to verify the seller. And that is why I say, get in touch with the Trade Hub, the USA Trade Hub, because they'll be able to, they're already working with some of these exporters. So the other thing is there's a lot of risk. So you could pay in advance and you may not get the cargo, right? So look at the different payment methods and look at what works for you and the seller. But also remember, the seller may put a lot of investment in getting that product ready to export to you. So you may need to pay a deposit for products. That is the reality, because you cannot expect somebody, if you're ordering for $100,000, you cannot expect somebody to get that cargo ready without you not paying anything and say, okay, no, you want an open account. That's ridiculous, right? So please, you need to continuously communicate with the sellers and use what works for you. So you've got the first payment method, which is cash in advance, which I would advise sellers, please use that. And I have advised them that. So it's the most secure form of obtaining payment, but it is used infrequently, obviously, because the risk is for you, the importer, right? You don't want to spend huge amounts of money and not get your product. So under these terms, the buyer prepays the entire shipment or a part of it. I'm not saying prepay the whole shipment. I'm saying at least look at, if you are not looking at a letter of credit, at least prepay part of the shipment so the seller can be assured that they're dealing with a legitimate buyer as well. Because yes, the risk may be on you, but he also or she also has that risk of exporting to you without payment. So it's pretty straightforward, they will send you a quote, you will say whether or not you're happy with it, and then they will send you a pro forma invoice and then say, okay. And during this time, you will be having discussions on whether or not part payment will be done or full payment. So yes, you may be uncertain about importing and prepaying, but remember, there's a lot of countries that you are dealing with as importers that you don't question paying. You just pay because they say you don't want to order, that's fine. You don't have to order. So we are normally forced to, especially the first world countries, we are forced to pay in advance. They don't actually give us a choice. So I think that is why it's important to have that discussion with the seller and get your sellers through reputable organizations. That is why I'm saying partner with the USA Trade Up and see if you can find sellers through this way, because they would have already worked with some of these exporters and they would have worked with the TPSPs as well who deal with them. The letter of credit. Okay, so this is a written undertaking of a bank to pay the beneficiary a stated amount of money if the beneficiary produces documents drawn up strictly in accordance with the terms of the LC. That sounds very complicated, okay? And it can be. So here's a scenario. You decide to find somebody in Malawi and you want, what can we get from Malawi, guys? Cashew nuts or groundnuts or anything really, and you want to make a purchase of about $20,000 from them, right? You're not happy with cash in advance. You do not want to pay in advance, right? But you want something secure. So you decide to use a letter of credit. So the exporter in Malawi sends you a quote, you're happy with it, and you say, okay, I want to use a letter of credit and get my bank involved. So they will send you a pro forma invoice and any other documents you need. You go to your bank, it could be Standard Bank, and you go there and you say, okay, I want to open a letter of credit. Standard Bank looks at your documents, and obviously you need the seller's details, you need their bank details, because what Standard Bank would do now is they would contact the seller's bank. So let's just say that's the Bank of Malawi. They'll contact the Bank of Malawi and say, okay, I've got a client here who wants to purchase from Mr. X or Miss X in Malawi. Does this company exist? And is it a client of yours? So Bank of Malawi will come yes or no. If it's a yes, great. If it's a no, that's a stop to your whole deal there. So once they're happy with the fact that your seller exists and this is the business that they're in and Bank of Malawi can verify it, then they put together a letter of credit. Now, a letter of credit is pretty much like a one-pager, right? But it has so many different issues that you need to deal with, because firstly, you've got to have the amount that you're paying. Then you've got to have a description of the cargo. And remember that description of the cargo has to really be correct. Because if the seller is saying to you, they're going to send you 100 cartons of groundnut or 100 pallets of groundnut or 100 bags of it, they cannot go and, that 100 bags of groundnuts will be written on the letter of credit, right? Whatever you decide will be written on the letter of credit. And remember, this is a documentary arrangement. So whatever is on the LC has to be on your commercial invoice, your bill of lading, your packing list. So if it's 100 bags, that's how it's supposed to be written, right? You cannot even have a spelling error, because everything that goes on the letter of credit is checked by the bank. So the letters of credit are governed by the UCP 600, and it's a global thing. And so the banks have specific ways of how they check the document, specific timelines on how. So they may have 7 days to check the documents and go back to the seller and so on. So it's a tedious product, and there's a lot of things, process. So there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that you may not be aware of. So that is why I'm saying when you deal with a letter of credit, whatever goes on the letter of credit has to be 100% correct. The amount of money, the shipment date. So if they say they will deliver to the clearing and forwarding agent on the 1st of March, and you know the clearing and forwarding agent will issue them with a transport document or transport waiver stating the 1st of March. If they go there on the 3rd of March, you're going to have a problem. They're going to have a problem with getting that payment. So if you state the 1st of March, it has to be there. That's it. Or you go back into changing the letter of credit, which is another cost that you have to incur, right? So that is why when I say, when it comes to letter of credits, be very careful. Whatever goes in there, even the input term, who pays for what, everything has to be clear. Where the delivery takes place, how it takes place. Because if you are dealing with sea freight, please don't put a vessel name or a ship name. The reason why I'm saying that to you is because there's been so much of upheaval in the logistics industry and the shipping industry that you may put one ship name. The shipping line will change the ship name or bring a different vessel in if there's delays and so on. Right? They just cut and run sometimes. So they may be in the port in Durban and suddenly they're like, okay, we're leaving the rest of the cargo. We are out of here. That is the reality. So they won't even pick up your cargo. Then to go back to the bank and say the ship name changed, you're paying for that. So every bit of information has to be correct, but try not to be too specific because things change, right? So if you have a delivery date and a delivery address, stick to it. The seller must stick to it, right? So you've drawn up the letter of credit. As soon as you both have signed, Standard Bank will take that $20,000 out of your account, put it onto a holding account, so you can't touch it now that you've made this agreement. The seller gets the goods ready, they deliver on time, and they get the documents. So all the documents has to state explicitly 100 bags of groundnuts. It cannot be changed. There can't be any difference to the letter of credit. Remember, the banks, this is a documentary process, so the banks are not going to go and check if that container was filled with groundnuts, right? All they are checking is the documentation. They're just only going by documentation. All they care about is the spelling errors and whether or not the dates are correct and so on, right? They don't care about the actual cargo, only you do. So the documents have to be 100% correct. The seller has to submit phytosanitary certificates, commercial invoice, packing list, certificate of origin, bills of lading or transport waiver. All of this goes to the Bank of Malawi, right? As soon as it's shipped, obviously because the seller wants their payment. The Bank of Malawi will check those documents and compare to the letter of credit. Anything that's wrong, the documents have to go back and be changed. So that's a waste of time, really. If it's correct, then they will send the documents to Standard Bank here in South Africa. Standard Bank will check it, release the payment to Malawi, and Malawi will release the payment to the seller. In the meantime, Standard Bank will send you the documents so you can go and clear the cargo. Okay. So letters of credit can be complicated, but it's the least risky. The main thing is make sure you know what you're doing, and whatever you've agreed to on the letter of credit is what can be done. So please make sure even the seller, they must be aware of how long it takes to make a delivery and so on. A documentary credit is similar to a letter of credit. It's just that the banks don't get as involved. It's cheaper. Yes, the seller may go and submit the documents at the bank. The bank doesn't care to check it, but they will transfer the money and so on. It's very different from a letter of credit because a letter of credit, as I've said before, it's governed by the UCP 600. They have a strict way of dealing with it. So the documentary credit, you may feel a lot better that you have the banks involved, but it doesn't, give you any less risk, really. The risk is still there. An open account is where the seller actually agrees to accept payment once you've got the document. So if you're the importer and you say you want an open account, so the seller will send you the documents and then you will make payment, right? Look, these things do happen where people have these arrangements, but it's, once you've had a long-term relationship with a seller and they know who you are and they've dealt with you before, you will not get it right at the beginning, usually, unless the seller is very inexperienced and is just desperate to make the sale. But I've advised them, you rather cut your losses. If someone's not willing to do a letter of credit or at least pay a deposit, cut your losses and move on, because you do spend money on producing goods. So you've already wasted money, and on top of that, you're not getting paid anything, right? So it's a huge loss. So when dealing with payment methods, please always discuss it with the seller and do what works for both of you, and understand you're both business people. You both want to make money and you both want to reduce your risk. But as negotiating everything, whatever you negotiate, it's got to be a win-win for everyone, to a certain extent. So you can't expect to get somebody to send you goods without you paying anything. And if you don't trust them to actually send the goods, don't do business with them. So you must be willing to make some sort of payment or at least open a letter of credit to make that deal go through. If you're not, then it's better that you walk away and the seller walks away, because relationships are based on trust. And it's very hard to get that trust in an international relationship where you don't know buyers and sellers. You don't know who you're working with and whether they legitimately exist. I've spoken to importers who've gone to China, looked at a factory, right? Ordered goods and not gotten the goods. The next time they go to China, the factory doesn't exist. Okay, so these things happen everywhere, right? But it is a risk that you take when being involved with international trade. But ultimately, the reason why you're importing is because you don't necessarily have the product here in South Africa. And the best bet is to work with the SADC countries because they're close by. You can hop onto a plane and go and speak to the sellers, okay? So that is possible. It's a lot cheaper than going to Europe or going to China or any other country to import. But please be wary of your payment methods and make sure it does work for both you and the seller. Okay, moving on to Incoterms. As we've said before, Incoterms are international commercial terms to provide internationally accepted definitions and rules of interpretation for commercial terms used in contracts for the sale of goods. Yes, again, it sounds very complicated, but it is not really once you start understanding Incoterms and you start understanding how you can use it to reduce your risk and work with your sellers and buyers. Okay, so when selecting the Incoterm, buyers and sellers need to consider the following: your experience with international trade, the risks associated with the Incoterm, the cost and financial responsibility, and experience handling the transport operators, suppliers for international shipments. So what Incoterms are basically acronyms, right? So when you are talking to the seller, I mean, there's a lot to discuss. Where does delivery take place? Who pays for the transport, right? So you speak to the seller, okay, are you going to pay for the clearing and forwarding agent? Are you going to pay for the trucking to the border? Who's going to do the clearing on that side? Am I going to do the clearing on the import side? And there's so many questions just looking at the logistics of it all. So these acronyms just make it so much easier that if we know it's X works in a warehouse in Botswana, I as a seller, I need to make sure that I just make arrangements with the transporter and they go pick up from that warehouse, and all the risk is on me, and I need to have insurance from there, right? So you don't have to go back and forth, because if you are continuously going back and forth, you are going to miss something. There is information that somebody's going to drop the ball somewhere. So that is why Incoterms are in place. Incoterms previously was only about international shipments. You can use it in domestic trade as well now. Okay, so for this presentation, we'll be looking at only Incoterms 2020, but in the cross-border toolkit, you've got Incoterms 2010 and 2020 on page 31, okay? So all of it is explained in detail. All you have to do is go and select the Incoterm that you want to use and look at what your responsibilities are. So I'm just going to go through a quick explanation of all the Incoterms, and then we'll go into the tool for the Incoterms on the toolkit, right? So for any mode of transport, you've got 7 Incoterms, and for sea and inland waterway, you've got 4. Remember, the Incoterms are only between you and the seller, okay? It doesn't involve anyone else. Yes, it's about your logistics and stuff, but the logistics people that you deal with, they don't have anything to do with this. This just tells you who needs to do what, right? The logistics people are not involved in whether it's exports or whatever it is. They just know that you as a buyer, you gave them instructions, this is what you need to do, okay? The shipping lines don't care about your Incoterms. It's got nothing to do with them, unless it's about who's deciding on the freight rate and whose business they're supposed to be getting, whether it's the exporters or the importers business, right? So Incoterms is just between you and the seller. So your first 7 is for any mode. So whether it's rail, air freight, truck, or even sea, you can use any of these 7 Incoterms. Please remember, do not use the sea Incoterms for any mode. You've got enough Incoterms here, right? So X works. So if you look at the diagrams, you'll see where the blue line is basically what the seller has to do. The orange line is what the buyer needs to do. Okay, so for X works, the seller needs to get the goods ready and have it packaged and ready to be transported. As you can see, the package is next to the truck, which means he's not loading it. You need to make arrangements as the buyer to get it loaded onto the truck and get it transported, whether it's from Malawi or Botswana or Mozambique, to you, right? So even if it's going by a ship, your responsibility is make the booking with the shipping line or a freight forwarder and make sure that you get the goods to you, right? So it starts up at the seller's warehouse. You will have the costs are for you and the risks are for you. So when we're looking at risk, we're looking at who needs to pay insurance. So here, the buyer has to pay the insurance right from the warehouse to your own warehouse or your own premises. And always keep in mind where the risk passes and what you need to do as a buyer, because you have to make sure you have insurance. There's so many things that could go wrong. So you need to be aware that insurance is important and with international trade. I mean, if you're going to pay $100,000 for goods, you cannot say you're not going to be buying insurance for those goods, right? The ships do sink. And if they do sink, you also have some cost from the shipping line for that. So that's general average, and that's a whole different topic. But you need to be aware of these things. Okay, so free carrier. Here, it could either be at the seller's warehouse, or at a warehouse at origin. So free carrier is where risk passes at origin when the goods are delivered to the first carrier. So the first carrier could be the shipping line or it could be the freight forwarder, right? So as soon as it gets into the first carrier's premises or onto their truck, the risk passes. So you need to have a delivery point for that so you can have your insurance. And from then onwards, you will have to make sure that you are paying for the costs and the risk. So whether it's the import clearance and so on. Remember as well for X works, the buyer is doing the export clearance and the import clearance. But no matter what Incoterm you're using, the seller needs to provide you with your commercial invoice, your packing list, your certificate of origin, your phytosanitary certificate, but the transport bill of lading, that will be dependent on the Incoterm. So if you are using X Works, you will have to arrange the transport bill of lading. If it's free carrier, you are arranging the carrier, so you will have to arrange the transport bill of lading, right? Carriage paid to. Here, the delivery happens at destination. So the carriage paid to, the seller will deliver it to a named place of destination, but the risk is yours. You will be, as the buyer, you'll be paying for the insurance. CIP, carriage and insurance paid to. Here, the seller again pays for the costs of getting it delivered to a named place in destination. They'll even pay for insurance, but the risk is yours as an importer. So if anything happens, even though the seller has paid for that insurance, they did it on your behalf. So be careful when you're using CIP and CIF because you may need to have top-up insurance. Remember, if I'm the exporter and I'm paying for insurance on your behalf, you're getting minimum insurance, okay? And that is how sellers operate. They will put in the minimum insurance. You as a buyer, you need to be very wary that you're getting those insurance documents and that if you need to, you have top-up insurance. So even though they're paying it in advance, whatever the seller is doing is going to be included in your quote as well, or your invoices. DAP is delivered at place. So here the seller delivers at a named place in destination, at the destination. The risk and costs are for the seller. So they'll pay for their insurance and the costs, right? Delivered at place unloaded. So this could be at any place at the destination and the seller will be responsible for unloading the truck. Please remember, these are extra costs. So getting forklifts, getting people arranged for offloading trucks and loading trucks and stuff. So you need to be aware of who has to do what. And that is why it's important to know the Incoterms, so it's easier. You know who has to do it. DDP is where the seller delivers and they do the import clearance. It's only under DDP that you'll get a seller to do import clearance, right? So if there's anything to do with customs clearance from the export side or from the seller side, they don't do the import clearance unless it's DDP where they deliver at named place of destination, but they don't offload the goods. You are responsible for offloading the goods, right? So that's the 7 Incoterms for any mode of transport. Here we've got 4 Incoterms just for sea and inland waterway, right? So remember, if it's on a barge or feeder vessel or a normal mother vessel, whatever it is, as long as it's going by a sea or river, then you can use the rules for sea and inland waterway. So free alongside ship, the seller has to get it into the port and ready for loading onto the ship, right? So their risks and costs stop there. They get into the port. From there, you would have already told them which vessel it's going on, or which ship name, and you'll tell them these are the stack dates, or they can find out the stack dates and make sure that they get it on time to be loaded onto that vessel. Okay, so they must make sure. So there's a lot of communication between you and the seller. So you've got to arrange this booking with the shipping line or the freight forwarder and tell them exactly when the delivery has to take place in the port, right? So be aware of what your responsibilities are as well as an importer. FOB, this is where the seller pays for the container to be on board the vessel. So all those landside charges right until it gets onto the vessel, that's for the seller. The risks pass once it gets on board the vessel. So you'll be doing the booking with the shipping line, and you'll be making payment to the shipping line to get the cargo to you. And all the risk from the time it gets on board the vessel is for you, the importer. So make sure you've got that insurance in place and don't assume a ship is unsinkable. Okay, we've had a lot of cases in the past few years. So then you've got cost and freight. Here, the seller arranges the freight to destination port. Okay, so once it gets into the destination port, the minute it's offloaded from the vessel and gets into port, then all the rest of the costs are for you, the buyer. The risk for the seller stops once it gets on board the vessel though. So please keep this in mind with cost and freight. And from there, that risk is for you, so make sure you've got your insurance ready. CIF, it's similar to CIP. Here, the costs are till destination port for the seller. The risk passes once it's on board the vessel. So once it's on board the vessel, you need to have insurance, but the seller does purchase minimal insurance on your behalf, right? So remember, you don't have to understand all of this. You don't have to memorize all of this because all that information is on the toolkit. So here, you just go onto XWorks on the toolkit on page 31. So it'll start up with 2010 Incoterms and move on to the 2020 Incoterms. So we've included all the Incoterms, all the explanations, right? And even how you write it out. So you've got XWorks, which is for any mode of transport. And here you've got XWorks, then you've got to insert the name, place of delivery. This is how you write it on the document. And make sure that if you have Incoterm, you write the year, because different years have different rules, right? FOB for 2000 and FOB from 2010 onwards is very different. For FOB in 2000, it was the risk passed when it passes the ship's rail. So there was a lot of issues with that because what if it falls as it's passing that ship's rail and so on. So remember, whenever you're writing out the Incoterms, you need to make sure you're using the year and the actual delivery place and date for delivery. Okay. We also tell you where delivery takes place. So you just go and look at your toolkit and you'll see, okay, delivery takes place at the seller's premises, name, place, agreed time, and not loaded. Okay. It tells you what the seller is responsible for and the document. So remember, the seller is always responsible for the documentation. The only documentation they're not responsible for or may not be responsible for is your transport bill of lading, and that's dependent on what Incoterm you use, and your import permit, which you as an importer needs to arrange. And we tell you exactly where risk passes. So we'll risk passes at place of delivery at the agreed time, and your place of delivery for XWorks is the seller's premises, and the buyer will require insurance from this point on. Okay. So free carrier as well, 2020, you've got to write it out on all your documents in the same way. Delivery to carrier or person nominated by the buyer at the agreed point. So if we go back to the pictures, here, they have to deliver to the carrier or whoever you've asked them to contact for delivery, they need to deliver to that person, right? So we've tried to state it as simply as possible. So all you have to do is, just look at the different Incoterms that you're looking at using and decide from there. So with free carrier, the seller is responsible for all costs up until delivery. So the delivery takes place at the first carrier. Up until that point, any transport costs, any issues, packaging, all of that the seller has to take responsibility for, right? And packaging that are necessary for the purpose of delivery. And where applicable, seller will be responsible for export clearance. Okay. Remember, the documents will more or less be the same, and make sure that the seller, where they need to be doing export clearance. For free carrier, the risk passes at place of delivery at the agreed time. And you, the buyer, you will need to have your insurance from that point. Carriage paid to, delivery to carrier or person nominated by the buyer at the agreed point within the agreed period. And the risk passes at place of delivery. And you, the buyer, you will need insurance from that point. Delivered at place as well, it's pretty straightforward. Delivered at place unloaded as well, pretty straightforward. And DDP, which is where the seller does literally everything except offload the truck at the end, right? Your C Incoterms, you've got your free alongside ship. The seller delivers the goods when the goods are placed alongside the vessel on a quay or barge nominated by the buyer at the named port of shipment, right? So the cargo has to get into the port and into the stacks ready for loading. Okay, so the seller is responsible for all costs up until delivery, which is in the port. The seller must pay the cost of those checking operations and packaging that are necessary for the purpose of delivering, and the seller will be responsible for export clearance. So it just depends on what Incoterm you want to use, what risks you want to take on as a buyer, and really it's a lot of cost depending on what Incoterms you do choose. So you need to be careful. So if a seller says they want to sell based on X works, would you accept that as a buyer? And if you do or don't, what are your reasons? Have you imported before? Do you know what any transporters in Malawi or in Botswana or in any country? Do you know the process of actually getting things picked up and what the delays are and so on? Remember, in every different country, there's different issues, okay? In some countries, there may be fines, okay? And this is a reality. So a seller in a different country may be used to the process, may be used to the delays and all the other issues where there's constantly roadblocks and so on. Even in South Africa, your trucks are stopped all the time. There's always fines to be paid. So when you are dealing with deciding what Incoterm to use, always keep in mind, what experience do you have? And do you really want to deal with those problems? Because you rather avoid it at a cost. Yes, the seller may charge you more for the goods, but remember, you may not be able to negotiate a lot better than they do. And also, you don't want to have that risk of having a container stopped in Malawi or Mozambique. Like if you're dealing with Mozambique, there's the language barrier. So always think about all the different issues that could be faced. And the reason is not to put you off importing or exporting. It's to say these are the realities. This is what shippers deal with all the time. This is what cargo owners deal with. It's not impossible because there's millions of tons of traded goods every year. But you just need to understand, you know, the realities of it, and just take it with a pinch of salt, really. Just be aware that it's going to happen. Don't spend too much time complaining about it. Rather just get it sorted out and do whatever you can in advance. So that is why we focus on, and if you go through the cross-border trade toolkit right from the beginning, we start off with the export process where as a business, people need to think about, are their businesses ready for exporting? Have they registered with the right organizations, with the right ministries? Do they know the process of a phytosanitary certificate? Do they know the processes of getting a certificate of origin, right? And that's why we put it together. So, and as importers, do you know what registrations you need to have? From your registering with CIPC, which is pretty straightforward these days. And they even automatically, once you register with CIPC, you automatically register for tax. So, wow, the tax money is always in there, right? And then you've got to go and register for as an importer or an exporter, and that you do with customs directly. So you don't need to pay for all of these services. CIPC costs you probably like less than 300 Rand to register a business. Once you do that, you automatically register for tax. Then you go open a bank account. You make sure you have your proof of address and all your documents. Then you go to customs and say you want to be an importer and this is the type of products you want to import. It may take about 2 weeks or so. Normally, if it's straightforward, it takes about 2 weeks to register as an importer. And then you look at what import permits you need and who the sellers are and so on. So before you start importing, make sure you've also followed your processes. Don't wait for goods to come in and then you're like, oh my God, I don't have an import code. And people do that. And we all actually, do these things. And even if you order something internationally, like, a dress or something, and then they ask you, do you have an importer code? Like, no, it's one dress. So these are things you have to be aware of as an importer, processes that you need to follow. So we are moving on to understanding the shipment timeline. Now, remember, as importers, you're not in control of the shipment timeline, okay? And to a certain extent, neither is the exporter, because they can do whatever they can to get the documents ready. They can follow all their processes perfectly, but there may be a lot of issues that happen along the way that they cannot control. So under the international supply chain model, you buy, ship, pay, and you've got quite a few different players in the market. You've got your suppliers, intermediaries, authorities like customs and the ministries, and then the ultimate customer, which is you, the buyer. So the exporter firstly needs to prepare for export. Then you've got the export itself, getting the cargo ready, transport, and then you need to prepare for import and the actual import itself processes. There's a lot of processes that happen, and it happens simultaneously. So as soon as you get your quote, you are also starting to do your import permit application if it's agricultural products, right? So remember, there's so much happening. And then if you decide on a letter of credit, you are sitting at the bank trying to sort that out. So be aware that there are a lot of procedures and processes that you need to go through. You've got your commercial procedures where between you and the seller, you are establishing the contract between the two of you. You order the goods, the seller needs to look at their timelines and advise when they can make delivery. I've advised exporters in the different countries, be realistic. Don't tell an importer you can do a delivery in 1 week when you know for sure how slow different departments are and you can only do it in 3 weeks. Rather be honest upfront, tell the truth. This is going to take at least 3 weeks. So you as an importer, you can make a decision on whether or not you want to order it and how it will affect your supply chains. Because if you are ordering, let's just say textiles, right? And you're ordering for an organization like EdCon, you cannot be late. They will reject the goods. That's it. Because when you are dealing with retailers, there are specific seasons, there are specific sale dates, and so on. So they won't even take the stuff. So you need to also let your the sellers know, listen, this is what I'm dealing with. You don't have to tell them who the buyer is. You can say, I have a buyer with these strict requirements. Can you meet them? If you can't, tell me now. Okay. So my advice is always be as transparent as possible. Obviously, we don't want to give away who the actual buyer is, but you need to give them enough information that they can tell you honestly whether or not they can do the order. Okay, so that advising on delivery is very, very important, because the exporters have gone through the processes of looking at their different timelines. And let me tell you, some groups are choosing the same products with totally different timelines, because some people were actually aware of what the processes were, and others, because they haven't exported, like let's just say bananas before, they didn't realize, okay, these are the issues with exporting bananas, and this may not be realistic. And yes, we didn't check whether the importer has an import permit, right? So to have that relationship, you have to be transparent, tell them exactly what you require, and be explicit about it to the point. And they must basically be able to say yes or no, whether they can do it. And if they say no, then look at maybe, if you have got a later order or something, then look at ordering from them and say, yeah, okay, I understand you can't make this order, but would you be able to make the next order, and so on. And part of the commercial procedures is the payment and deciding what the payment method is. Your transport procedures are establishing the transport contract. So if you're dealing with shipping, your contract happens when you make a booking with the shipping line. It doesn't happen when you get your bill of lading. The contract is at the booking stage where you booked, and they've agreed to give you the space and so on. So establishing the transport contract, that could be either the seller or you, depending on the Incoterm that you use. Collecting, transporting, and delivering the goods, that could be either one of you. And providing weighable goods receipt and status report. So these are things that you need to deal with whichever carrier you're using, whether it's a clearing or forwarding agent, or you need to have status reports about where the cargo is at any given stage. And work with people who actually have that information and can provide you with that information easily. Because you don't want to be picking up the phone to in a foreign country and trying to figure it out because they don't have a website and so on. Okay, so just be aware that every step of the way takes time. So even if you're ordering X works, right, make sure that the seller knows exactly when you're picking up the cargo, so they can prepare. And if they're not prepared, they must let you know, so then you can make arrangements with the transporter, because you don't want a truck to be gone to their warehouse, right? And then the goods are not ready, and then they say, okay, no, come back tomorrow. That's an added cost for you. Okay, so that is why communication is really, really important. And even if they are delivering to you, make sure you have the delivery date so you can make arrangements. You don't want them to send the goods to you and you are not there, or you haven't made arrangements with forklifts and so on. Regulatory procedures, you've got the obtaining export and import licenses. So as I said, when an import license is involved, put in that application as early as possible. At quote stage, get that application in, because it may really take 30 days. Okay, and it may not always be approved, depending, because we don't know what's happening in the different agricultural sectors in the different countries. The Department of Agriculture may be aware of diseases, plant diseases that we are not, and they may have put a hold on importing from, certain products and so on. So try as much as possible to put in your applications as early as possible. And the same goes for your vet health and so on. Whatever applications you need, do it as early as possible. Providing customs declarations, that it depends on your Incoterm, who's doing the customs clearance. Usually with the, on the export side, it's the seller. On the import side, it's the buyer. I always say, try not to do the export clearance or import clearance if it's not in your country. Especially when you're new, reduce your risk and the time you're wasting dealing with things you don't understand and processes you don't understand. Because in some countries, the processes are manual. Okay, you're not dealing with clearing and forwarding agents who just go and tap on the keyboard and your bill of entry is done, and within the next few minutes you've got your clearance, right? You're dealing with people who are writing it down on the form and going physically to customs and so on. Provide cargo declarations, apply for trade security processes, and clear goods for import and export. Those are all part of your regulatory procedures. Financial procedures is provide credit rating, insurance, providing credit. So these are things that as buyers and sellers, you're doing on your own, because you may not have all the funds to purchase something. So you're going to go to the bank and go and apply for a business loan or whatever it is. Or you may speak to investors about looking for funding, because not everyone starts up with the business, with $100,000 in the bank account. That's ridiculous. Most people start out with businesses with no money in the bank account. So you do rely on funding, and it takes time to get funding. So all of these processes need to be done as early as possible. If you're looking at importing, make sure you have funds. If you don't, look at ways that you can get the funding and look at people who are interested in that sector. So luckily we are in South Africa, so there's more options. And now you've got these angel investors and all these different things that you can look at. So when you're looking at the supply chain model, you are looking at all these different procedures, but they don't happen one at a time. They're all happening at the same time. While you're dealing with the commercial procedures, getting your commercial invoice or your pro forma invoice, you're dealing with doing your import permit and getting the letter of credit sorted out and so on. So be aware that you pretty much have to be on your feet all the time and figuring things out as you go along. So the export process is where, and this is in detail in the toolkit, somewhere right at the beginning. I don't have that page. So it's basically them sending you a quote, and they look at what they need to include in the quote, choosing the clearing agent, and we look at how they need to select their service providers, pro forma invoices, and what information. So we've got examples of pro forma invoices with the headings of what needs to be there, including the commercial invoice and packing list, right? Processing the export order. This is where you give them the go-ahead to go, and then they start manufacturing or processing. And during this time, they are also getting the documents ready. So the packing list, commercial invoice, all happens around this time, and making arrangements with the clearing and forwarding agent. So always be in contact so you know when the goods are going to be ready, when it needs to be picked up, and all of that. Documentation. As I've said before, the exporter is responsible for majority of the documentation, right? So the commercial invoice, packing list, transfer waiver, the exchange control forms on their side, but you are responsible for the import permits. Okay, but they may need permits on their side for exporting, right? So that will be under your phytosanitaries and so on. And then receiving payment, this goes back to your letters of credit and document credit. And then presenting documents either to you or to the banks, right? And what I have advised them is to make sure that whoever's doing the documentation is very detail orientated, because you cannot have spelling mistakes in these documents. You cannot have, parts of it that's not filled out, whether it's the quantity or the quality or whatever it is. You need to have all of that information on the documents. And the other part for the export process is the after-sales service, where they pick up the phone or they send an email to say, are you happy with the goods, and so on. Okay. The import process is your import registration. You as an importer, you need to register with customs. Then choosing your clearing and forwarding agent and your import clearance process. It's very important to use the correct HS codes. So every product has an HS code, right? Whether it's in raw form or cooked form or powder form, they may have different HS codes. So it's good to understand which HS code you need to use, because you may need different documents for it. And the documentation that you will get from the seller, your commercial invoice, packing list, and so on. Always be aware that there will be shipments stopped for inspection. And as I've said before, you could have 3 shipments that went smoothly, and then suddenly they decide to stop it, right? So customs has triggers on their system. And if there is something wrong with the documentation, you must know immediately it will be triggered. Because if you are dealing, let's just say with sea freight, right? And the shipping line has submitted their manifest. So the manifest is a list of containers and what's in the containers that the shipping line submits to customs, right? So what does customs do? They have systems in place to compare it to your submissions, your bill of entry. If there's any issues on that, they will stop your shipment. Okay, so just be aware that there are all of these things. That is why I keep stressing, get your documentation correct. Make sure the seller has sent it. Make sure you get drafts of the document so you can check it, so you don't have problems when it gets into the country, and you don't have problems with customs. Customs has their process to follow. You can't fight them on that. They know what their process is. They will tell you, these are the documents I need, send them to me. There's no point fighting with them. Just do what they say, and that is the quickest way to get your goods from them. Import permit, as I've said, apply for it as early as possible. From the time you're getting a quote, submit your import permit. It's not a lot of money to apply for an import permit, so just do it as early as possible. Even if you're not 100% that you're getting the cargo, because today you may say, okay, no, I'm not going to import, but 5 days later you may have changed your mind, and you would have lost 5 days of that import permit process, and it does take up to 30 days. Okay, so establishing timelines. So looking at all the different processes, establishing the contract, transport procedures and contracts, regulatory procedures, financial procedures. All of these things have to be taken into account when looking at a timeline. And this is something that the exporter does, right? So they can give you a delivery date. Okay, but part of your assignment is for you to figure it out as well. Not to make your life harder, but so that you understand that there's different processes to be followed from their side. And you may not, time is money, right? But you need to account for that time to be able to make that money, right? You cannot tell your buyer, if the seller tells you delivery will take place on Friday, what are you telling your buyer? You're going to deliver next Monday. But you don't really know if that delivery is actually going to take place on Friday. You don't know what could happen. So you always give yourself that extra leeway and a few extra days or weeks or whatever it is you think you need. Because as I've said to exporters, be clear and be aware of what the delays are. So you can be, transparent about the timing. And the same goes for you as importers, because let's be honest, you're not importing to consume yourself, you're importing for other consumers and other buyers. So you also have to be very clear about the timelines. So international trade transaction encompasses all activities related to the establishment of commercial contracts, which is between you and the seller, the arrangement of inland and cross-border transportation of goods, and that going back to the Incoterm, you need to know who's responsible for that. Okay, the export and import formalities to meet regulatory requirements, so your customs bills of entries, your phytosanitary certificates, your import permits, and then the payment for purchased goods, your financial procedures. So here it's about deciding what payment choice that you want, what payment process you're going to go through, and understanding how long it takes, because a letter of credit is not a quick process. It takes time. Okay, so these activities involve collecting, presenting, communicating, and processing the data required for the movement of goods. They require cooperation between many actors, including exporters, traders, government agents, and service providers from different countries. So you have a whole lot of people involved in the shipment, people you will never meet, okay? But you need to have relationships with them, whether it's the transporter, shipping line, or whoever. My advice is just be polite. Coming from a shipping line and having a logistics background, working for a logistics company, I know how customers can scream, okay? As a customer service employee in a shipping line, I don't stop the ships outside the port, okay? I don't have control over how Transnet handles your cargo or whether they drop your container and damage your cargo. So remember that when you're dealing with freight forward and shipping lines, they also don't have control over the service providers and the government agencies and so on. And be clear about what you expect from them. So if you want updates on the shipment, ask them, how can I get the updates? Is there a website that I can go and just put in my container number and track it? Or do I phone in? Don't even waste your time phoning in a lot of these companies. So use their websites. If there's an issue that you pick up, always be tracking your cargo. If there's any issues, because even courier companies, they'll give you a tracking reference and you can go and track it. If you pick up an issue, let's just say it's 2 days late or a day late, then you get a hold of them and ask them what's happening, and do it as early as possible, because not everyone's sitting and checking your shipment. If there are hundreds and thousands of shipments, it gets there when it gets there, really. So because it's your shipment, you keep track of it and don't assume that they will do it. But also make sure you've got those relationships. Even customs, they have their processes. Don't fight it, just follow it and move on. There's no point in fighting with a lot of organizations about how they do things and why they do things. That's not your problem. Your problem is actually getting your cargo released on time and as quickly as possible. And the easiest way to do it is just follow what they tell you. So that's all the advice I can give you. Okay, so now we'll give you the brief on the assignment, which you'll be doing this afternoon and presenting tomorrow. Okay, let me just find this document. Okay, you'll be handed out copies of this assignment. So participants will prepare a PowerPoint presentation on the process of importing a product of your choice from any of the export countries mentioned in the regional cross-border trade toolkit to South Africa. The presentation should be no longer than 10 slides and cover the following requirements. You are required to select a payment method and Incoterm. That shouldn't be very hard now. Calculate customs duties, and remember, within the SADC region, you're not worried about customs duties. You need to calculate your VAT and excise where applicable. If you don't have any goods in mind or any price in mind, just use $20,000 as your FOB value just for calculating. Create a basic timeline for your expected delivery. I'm not expecting you to get the timeline correct, right? You don't normally know the export processes, but it's just for you to start thinking about what their processes are and how long the border processes and transport and all of that would take. And list the type of barriers faced when importing your selected product and how these barriers can be alleviated. We don't have a lot of control over barriers, but it's good to understand them and know what we're dealing with. Not because we're going to change them overnight, but then you know, okay, these are the issues and this is what I need to do in advance. So yes, I've imported from Botswana and I've imported bananas and it was stopped. Okay, and it took 2 weeks for it to be released. The cargo was damaged. Okay, then you need to know, okay, well, if I'm importing, maybe import in a refrigerated truck or refrigerated container, so it can be temperature controlled. So if it is stopped, you know, if for a week or two, it should be fine. I won't have a problem. So look at all of these things and your import permits, getting those done on time. So these are some of the barriers where you've got different requirements. Costs, I don't know whose email address we're going to be using for everyone to submit. So you can do this in groups or you can do it individually. And for those who are online, please, we would like you to participate and present tomorrow. And we have more than enough time for everyone to present. So please, if you're from the same organizations or you would like to work together with someone else, do so. It's also a way of networking. Okay, any questions? I think we can go into questions now. Okay. What is the most common Incoterm used for regional and freight import and export? To be honest, the most common globally is FOB and CIF, mostly because a lot of the cargo is going via sea. That's pretty much most of the cargo, how it's transported. So generally it's FOB, free on board, and CIF, cost insurance freight. And let me tell you, a lot of people use these for overland transport, even though they shouldn't. So I would advise people to use, FCA or CIP or whatever it is, but globally, FOB and CIF. Overland, it would be more FCA, I would think, but I honestly don't have the data or the stats on that. Okay, are there any other questions, guys, here?
Thanks very much, Mary. In what situations would you encourage an exporter to use DDP, delivered duty paid? I had a case where an exporter from the region was not exporting South Africa but to another country, and was trying to use DDP, and it seems like it was a disaster.
I normally, and I've said this to a lot of exporters, don't use DDP, but I did come across one from Eswatini, but he had his own trucking company, and he's had a long relationship with the buyer, so he knew the processes. So if you understand, that's why I always say, know and understand where you are at with international trade. So he basically had a product, he knew what the buyer wanted, how they wanted it packaged. He knew the border processes. He has his own trucking company. So he had a lot of control over it. So he's happy to continue with DDP. Okay. Some companies do it because they do understand the processes, or they've got really big clearing and folding agents. So if you're looking at, the Maersks of the world and the, Hellmans, the Schenkers, DHLs, they've got branches in all different countries. So if the clearing and folding agent you have has branches in the different countries, and they have the capability for the warehousing and the transport, then yes, you can do DDP. But you need to be very wary, because it does add on a lot of cost as an exporter. Things could go wrong and you could get fines. So you need to be very wary, and you have to have that money in advance to be able to pay for all of that. And the main thing is recouping that from the buyer themselves. So some exporters, they use CIF, where they control the sea freight, and they have agreements with the shipping lines based on their volumes. So if they are being charged $500 from the shipping line, they're charging you $700. So that's another way for them to make money, right? So remember that when you're choosing it, because some people will have a better buying power, so they will make more money from it. But if you go to the shipping line, you're not going to get $700. They might charge you $1,000 because you are only importing one container, whereas the exporter may be exporting 100 containers per month, and that's what their freight rate is based on. So if you're looking at exporters who have a lot of experience, who have relationships in place, even if it's a slight extra cost, rather do it and allow them to take control, because that volume is bargaining power. It's a way for them. They have those relationships with the shipping lines. The shipping lines, when you're dealing with 1,000 containers a month, you tell them jump, they will jump. Okay? And that's the reality with the clearing and folding agents. They want to keep your business. But if you've got 1 or 2 containers, they are not going to be interested in you. And that is it. It's volume cargo that they look for. So it's about your buying power with them as well. So if an exporter has that buying power with the clearing and folding agent, or they even have their own trucks, they can do DDP. But as I said, it's your experience, and it's your own, how much you're willing to pay in advance and so on. Okay, any other questions? have I been so clear that you have no questions, or is it just too much of information? Okay, is there anyone else online who has any questions? Okay, going back to Andrew, I hope you're happy with the answer. If not, and you need more clarity, let me know. Okay, nothing else. Any questions on the assignment? Any issues? Would you guys like to go into groups, or do you want to do it individually? No discussion, no questions. Have I said something wrong? Are you all happy, or? Yes. Oh, okay. So you want to form a group with whoever? Anybody else wants to form a group? I think before we do that, can you all introduce yourselves? Please, you can start. Yes. Okay, George.
Thank you. My name is George Makore. I've met some of you. I've spoken quite a bit with some of you. I am the Deputy Chief of Party for the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. And I'm sure my boss talked earlier about who we are. And I work with Cause, Ruth Melo, Lena, Doreen, quite a number of us here. They will introduce themselves. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nogwazi Khatebe from Trade Investment KZN. I'm responsible for export development, and I do promotions as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Evan Schiff. I am Portfolio Director for Food, Trade and Hospitality at DMG Events. So I run Africa's Big Seven, which is a retail-ready food trade show. I see everybody's nodding their heads, which is a very good sign. Citex, South African International Trade Expo, and then also the Hotel and Hospitality Show. Thank you.
I don't think I need to introduce myself. Good afternoon. My name is Cosmas Mamunze. I'm one of the portfolio managers at USAID Trade Hub.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is JP Cavallo, and I work alongside Evan at DMG Events as Head of Sales on the portfolios.
Hi, my name is Lindani, and I'm now realizing I'm probably the only one not from an organization. I'm from Yentaka Investments. We assist groups of women that are in the region. We have two platforms. We have a natural ingredients, raw materials, cosmetics platform, and we also have a technical platform that is energy related. I'm here specifically around the cosmetics raw materials platform. We just help them just bring in cosmetics raw materials to South Africa for manufacturers in South Africa.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edumisa Makongo. I work with the South African team at the USA Trade Hub. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bitumelo Jelele, and I'm the Program Assistant for the USA Trade Hub.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Doreen Ndlovu. I'm the Portfolio Specialist under the South Africa Cluster. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lena Mkorovirwa. I'm from the Monitoring and Evaluation Department at the USA Trade Hub. Thank you.
So Lena's here to evaluate all of us. For those who are online, if you can just take turns and unmute to introduce yourselves, please. I see Andrew, you've unmuted, so please go ahead.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Andrew Bolter. I'm with MEGA, the Mpumalanga Economic Growth Agency. We're the Trade Investment Promotion Agency for Mpumalanga Province.
Thank you. Okay, who's next? Anyone else online who'd like to introduce himself? Teresa? You can go ahead, Teresa. Okay, I don't hear anything from Teresa. Vicky? I don't know why we don't hear Teresa. Does anybody else want to introduce themselves?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Wendy Ngobo, and I'm the Communication Specialist for SA Trade Hub.
Thank you, Wendy. We've got Sipungile. Sipungile, I'm not sure if you're speaking, but I cannot hear you. Oh, there seems to be problems with the microphone. That's Teresa Moller, Executive Director from CECOSA. I'm not sure what that is. Oh, the Cosmetic Export Council of South Africa. Okay, thank you. Sibugile, if you can introduce yourself on the chat. Okay, guys from the room, are there any questions? Okay, no questions on the assignment. Are we all happy? Okay, you can decide to go into groups, but before we do that, I'm going to hand over to Cost so we can give you the evaluations for the day. Is that good? Okay, to the online participants, I think the assignment has just been shared with you. You would have, did you send it on email, Doreen, as well? Oh. Okay, you would have also received it on email from Doreen. Please confirm if you have received it. Okay, Kos, are you ready for evaluations? I think we're a bit ahead of time. Okay, thank you everyone. If you have any questions, please ask me at some point today. So yeah. For those participants who are online, you would have received emails with the evaluation link. Please fill them out so we know how we can improve the next webinars and presentations. If there's anything we haven't covered or anything you'd like further from the USA Trade Up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, for the second segment, for all the information. I think for today we've come to the end of our session. And the evaluations actually, for those that are here in Pretoria, those are your tickets to lunch. Yeah, so please complete. They mean a lot. We need the feedback is very important. We collect that and they go into the reports that Mary has to submit. So please complete the evaluation forms. So we from here, and for the online guys, thank you very much for being with us today. Let's connect again tomorrow morning when we do the second day activities. For those that are here, from here we go for lunch. So in terms of lunch, you go to reception, you pass the reception, and to your left, yeah, it's to your left, that's where the restaurant is. So let's meet there for lunch. Enjoy the rest of the day, colleagues. Thank you very much.